Surgeons of Reddit, what was the biggest mistake you made while operating on a patient? Malpractice stories can be tough. I'll lighten the mood a bit. Was doing varicose vein surgery on a very posh middle-aged lady. Very cut-class accent. There was an anesthetic that we used that sometimes induced some hallucinations, either going under or coming out of anesthesia, and heard some funny things. Anyway, this lady was in recovery, just coming out of the anesthetic. The team were around waiting for her to wake up and gag a little on the tube in her throat, for breathing, so we knew it was time to remove it. She gagged, we removed the tube, she smacked her lips and said loudly, in her incredible accent, "That's the best bit of cock I've had in years." The whole recovery room just fell about laughing. Luckily she didn't remember it. Next story. Med student here. I was watching a knee operation when the surgeon suddenly stopped, looked towards the staff absolutely shocked and asks, "This is the wrong knee, isn't it?" Basically he was told to operate the wrong knee, and hallway trough he realized it was too good looking to be the knee that needed the operation. Luckily there was no permanent damage done, the team reknit everything together and rescheduled the surgery. Next story. Not the surgeon, and I'm sure not even sort of his biggest mistake, but this was one of the more bizarre things I've witnessed in an OR. Surgeon brought a bad pair of glasses. So here we are, total hip replacement. Surgeon is going to town with what I lovingly call the human grater, which is a doohickey to make sure the new hip socket will fit in. Picture a cheese grater wrapped around a golf ball on the end of a power drill. It's not pleasant. Anyway. Dude's grinding away at the feller's hip and sudden yelps in surprise and stops, backing quickly away from the table. We're all like, the F? His glasses spontaneously broke in half. They were the type that didn't have rims, just lenses with a bar across the nose and bars for the ears. So the metal crossing the nose snapped at the screw. Surgeon quickly starts stripping off his gown, etc., had the full face shield get up, ortho ors are. Splashy, and leaves the room. Comes back with a roll of tape. Him and the circulating nurse can't get them fixed, so he just holds them to his face and has her run the tape around his head a few times. Then suits up again and goes back to acting like nothing happened. All in all added like 10 minutes to surgery time, at least that I could catch directly. Hadn't been with that surgeon before, but I can't imagine that was his best performance afterwards. Seeing as how his glasses were taped across his eyes at weird angles. But yeah, don't buy $5 readers for the OR. Next story. Not a surgeon, but I had a screw put in to hold together a fracture in my wrist. At the last moment before surgery, the anesthetist told me I could have the surgery with a local rather than general anesthetic as planned. So I let her make the call for me to be awake. During the drilling my surgeon started complaining at length of why he hates the drill he's using and how it's inferior to the other type or brand. It was apparently the only one he could find at the time and he didn't want to reschedule. Once the screw is in, the surgeon says to close up. Someone asked if the screw should protrude as much as it was, to which he responded no, but we can get away with it, and you never want to take a screw out and put another in as you essentially wear the thread of the bone. Then silence for about 10 seconds while I feel them shifting wrist around, followed by actually we better put a smaller screw in. When I was in recovery the surgeon was surprised how quickly I woke up and had a slight look of surprise when I told him I was only under local. Next thing he said was surgery went well. Next story. Not a surgeon but work for pathology. An oncologist I met at the lab would tell me all of these horror stories. We'll never forget about the one time a nurse threw someone's donated organ transplant into the rubbish bin, or when a man had the wrong leg cut off. Next story. Veterinarian here. We do quite a few surgeries, so I hope this counts a real response. Mistakes likely happen all the time. From nicked blood vessels to skin/organ tears. Most are probably fairly minor. In the veterinary world, I've certainly heard stories of male animals having an abdominal incision during a neuter since someone thought it was a female for a spay. Wrong limbs can be amputated. Surgical instruments and sponges/gauze can be forgotten in patients. There are many pre- and intra-surgical checklists to help prevent these, and I am sure it is even more developed in human medicine. Fortunately for me, the biggest surgical mistake is probably a suture slipping when removing an organ, resulting in minor internal bleeding, fairly easy to find the bleeder and get things stopped rather quickly. Or having a small bone break when repairing another fracture. Things happen. We address it and learn from it for all future patients. Next story. I'll share my not a surgeon but encountered a weird hospital mistake. Worked for a funeral home. Picked up remains from the hospital morgue and discovered an extra foot prior to cremation. Was an interesting call to the head of that department. Next story. My mother's surgeon. Well, not doing basic math correctly and sewing up a woman having spine surgery with 2 sponges still inside of her. My mom was 20 plus years sober, so she refused most of the pain meds. When they had to confess they effed up, she had a mental breakdown facing all that pain again. She got a lawyer and they settled ASAP, about $50,000. Mom thought that was fair, but my godfather is a retired federal prosecutor and said it would have been $100,000 easy with another attorney. Update, want to thank everyone on behalf of my mom for the good thoughts. This happened about 15 years ago. My mother has a master's in biology and knows, well, crap happens. It's a testament to her character that she decided the settlement was fair for an accident. Yet another example of how extraordinary my mom is and how underappreciated this retired HS biology teacher remains. Next story. Not a surgeon, but I can tell you of one. My mother-in-law had a bad fall while on vacation in Florida and had to have hip surgery. During they nicked her bowels without realizing it until almost 2 days later when she started complaining of abdomen pain and her blood pressure started dropping. By then she was already septic, went into a coma, and they couldn't save her. The hospital declared her death natural causes. We only know otherwise because my husband's family hired someone to do an autopsy before they cremated her body.